now. Okay, so from here on out, the rest of the lecture, although it's really not a lecture at all, it's just an introduction, is going to be recorded. But as we go through the semester, obviously, the lectures will be recorded. So if some of you can't, for instance, watch the lecture at the time, Tuesdays and Thursdays at 7, you're welcome to watch them later at your own leisure, obviously. But there are participation kind of things that take place during the classes. So if you can attend at 7 o'clock on Tuesdays and Thursdays, it would be obviously better for you in that regard. I'll explain those things like participation in a few minutes. Okay, so the other thing, this is Zoom. I don't know if how many of you are actually familiar with Zoom. It's a platform that we're using this semester at the university. Some of your other professors, if you're taking spring courses, may well be using Adobe Connect. That's perfectly fine. They're all pretty much the same. I just happen to like Zoom. I'm familiar with it, so that's what I'm using. Okay, I'm still admitting people to the class, so that's great. All right, so one of the things obviously that I'm going to do is share a screen with you each class, which means that I can pull up things like you're seeing now, which is the PowerPoint for our first class. So hopefully everybody can see it. If you have any problems whatsoever as we go through any parts of the lectures, and I'm talking about something that you, for instance, can't see, then please tell me, and I'll stop and try to correct it. So I'm still admitting people to the class, so that's cool. So there we go. All right, so you should have all in front of you then, therefore, the very first slide for environmental law. There will be other things that we're going to watch, including some videos, although as you probably all saw in an email I sent this afternoon, videos that, for instance, I pay for on YouTube or what have you that are on paid platforms, including Netflix. You can't actually incorporate those into these kind of lectures for copyright purposes. And as hard as I tried to get around that today, I couldn't. So there's a reason why Mark Zuckerberg is a billionaire, because they know how to protect their platforms. Okay, so having said that, so let's move on to the next slide. So for those of you who don't know me, and many of you do, I recognize a lot of your names, that's great. This is who I am. This is my email address. So you should have all received an email from me this afternoon where I reposted the link to this class. So you're welcome to email me at any time, right? I'm very open to receiving questions from you. It really doesn't matter what time of day it is. I'm on my email virtually all the time. So if I see a question from you, I will get back to you as soon as possible with an answer. Hopefully, if you want to actually have a meeting with me, the equivalent of, for instance, coming to my office for a meeting, then we can have a Zoom meeting one-on-one, and I'm perfectly happy to do that as well. All right. So looking through what I've done here now, these slides are fundamentally taken from the course outline, which is also posted for you on Moodle. It's hard not to say CMS anymore, but it's Moodle. All right, so this class is basically obviously environmental law, which, because it's a law class, deals with basically issues of the environment, and there are a lot of them within the legal context. So we'll obviously talk about things like the jurisdiction of who has the responsibility over various environmental issues, whether it's the federal government, provincial government, perhaps municipal government. That happens. There's also charter issues. There's almost always charter issues with respect to anything legal that will come up. And we'll deal with things that are intra-legal, dealing with the environment, things like environmental assessments, environmental regulations, prosecutions for breaches of environmental laws, and those kind of things. It's really interesting. Again, I've done this before. I did it a couple of years ago. Everybody seemed to really enjoy it. So it's something that most of you are very familiar with. The environment, things like climate change and what have you, are all top of the mind kind of thing. And so those are the types of issues that we'll talk about in this class. All right, the required materials is this textbook. All right, so you should have a little picture of me up in the corner of the screen. So this is what you should be able to see. And so it's an introduction to environmental law and policy. It's the third edition from Paul Muldoon. It's a 2020 edition, so obviously it's really up to date. I tried to make sure, and this is a different text than the one I used before, but I was trying to making sure that I found you a textbook that you could acquire a digital edition for. And it's published by Emond Publishing, and they do have a digital edition, so you should be able to get that through the university bookstore. I've given them the link for that, but if for some reason or other they haven't given you the link or are slow in giving you the link, send me an email and I'll send you the link. All right, I want to make sure that you have these materials. You can obviously order a hard copy of the text if you like, but that's more expensive and more time consuming than it is to have a digital copy. So hopefully you take advantage of that. All right, these are the topics for the course. These are basically all again set out in the course outline, and you'll see there are 5 major topics that are in this this list. They're all in bold with subtopics below those, and those essentially are broken down into the 5 weeks of this course that we have, in which we're actually going to be doing lectures and talking about things. And the last week of the course will be taken up with group presentations and summing things up, and we'll talk about that a little later. But as you can see in these topics, you have the introduction, which is going to give you the broad framework of environmental law and the Canadian legal framework within which the environment takes place. There are aspects of environmental law, which are things like the environment and Indigenous peoples. That's incredibly important. The relationship between Canadian and international law. So, we have a great number of international instruments like the Kyoto Accord and the Paris Treaty kind of thing that are relevant to environmental law that we'll talk about. We have things that are called regulatory regimes, which is really the nuts and bolts of environmental law, where governments put in place regulations to ensure that the environment is protected. And we'll talk about what those are and what happens when they're not followed, which deals with things like, hang on a second, I'm admitting somebody else, sorry. Dealing with things like environmental assessments, planning regimes, how corporations deal with the environment in a market environment. And then lastly, we'll deal with how courts and tribunals are used to protect the environment. And we'll talk about a recent promulgation of what's called the Environmental Bill of Rights and access to information. So that's an overview of the topics. And then again, of course, the last week will be the group presentations, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. So these are the course requirements. I've broken them down into 5 equally important segments. It'll be, this should make it fairly easy for you to keep track of how well you're doing in the course. And it should also give you a really good opportunity to do very well. And because it's a spring course, I'll be marking things on a more lenient basis than I would in a regular fall or winter semester course in person, because I recognize that this interaction between us, while it is somewhat effective, I don't think can possibly be as effective as being in person. So I want to give you the credit for doing this and not to be certainly penalized because it's not the same as having me in the classroom talking to you and sometimes answering questions on one-on-one. All right, so of these matters, the first one is participation. So those of you who've had me before know that I value participation. I really do see a lot of interest in having you ask me questions, you responding to questions from me, and or interacting with other students. That's certainly possible on this platform, and in that regard, we can use the chat function, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. That's part of the Zoom kind of thing. Participation is worth 20% of your grade. There's going to be 10 to 12 classes this semester, which again is only 6 weeks long. And if you simply attend, you're going to get an 8 out of 10 for attendance, which is higher than what I usually do in regular semesters, which is an A. So you're going to get 80% just for showing up to the class. And then again, if you ask or answer any questions, that's going to raise your grade from 8 to 9 or 10 out of 10. Likewise, at the end of the semester, when it comes to putting your participation grades together, I will knock off the bottom 25%. So it'll be your best, 8 or 9 or, marks out of 12, 13, or 14, whatever it may well be. So it's a really good opportunity to get, an excellent grade for this particular part of the marking scheme. There are going to be in-class exercises, which I'll talk about a little bit more, but I'm going to try to do those as often as possible, and I'll explain to you how that's going to take place in this environment. I think it's going to be kind of interesting. It's a function that Zoom does, and everything that I've read about how they work seems to be a fairly decent way to engage the class. There's going to be a midterm exam. It's going to be based upon the lectures, the readings, the PowerPoint slides, perhaps videos that I do in fact get to show you. And it'll be dealing with the content of the course up to and including June the 18th, which is only 2 weeks from Thursday, right? Because this is a condensed semester. It'll be distributed as a Google form. It'll be multiple choice and true and false questions. There will probably be, and I haven't set the exam yet, there'll probably be 50 to 60 questions on it, but it's open book. All right, so as long as you have this with you, again, it could be digital, it could be on your phone or on your tablet or your laptop. If you have that with you, the questions will take you to the page where the answers can be found. So hopefully that's a pretty straightforward process for you. So I've done that before. I did that, in the last semester with a couple of classes, and it worked really well. And so we'll do that again. So there will be a class presentation. It's really a group presentation, which will take place on July 9th, which is actually our very last class. That's our last Thursday. I'm going to divide you up into probably 4 or 5 groups. I'm going to give you the opportunity to make your own groups if you're comfortable in doing that. And if you're not, I'll put you in a group. All right, and then we'll have a very specific question. Obviously, it's going to be an environmental question, and you will be arguing and presenting the position of a certain party with respect to that question that I'm going to present. And it's going to be a real live question, as in something out of the news that is topical today, kind of thing. And then what you'll do is you'll, over the course of, I'm going to give it to you in a couple of weeks, and over the course of the following weeks, you'll meet as a group and then put it together. And as maybe if you haven't done this before, as difficult as it might sound that, 5 or 6 of you have to coordinate with yourselves to put together a group PowerPoint presentation and speaking, what have you. My experience again from last semester is that actually it can work really quite well from a distance. So don't worry too much about not being in the same room as the rest of the members in your group when you put this together. It will work. And I found that you guys as students are pretty innovative in making that a reality. So yeah, I'm sure it's not going to be a problem. Again, there'll be a final exam. It'll be a combination of multiple choice and true or false. The same premise. It's going to be, basically from this textbook. It will be open book. So it'll be very straightforward. So as long as you're familiar with the material and you pay attention to the lectures, because some of the material I give you in my lectures and PowerPoints goes beyond what the textbook has in it. As long as you're familiar with it, you'll do very, very well on it. The registrar obviously has to pick the dates for the final exam, and it'll be within a week kind of thing of when this semester ends. Okay, so this slide is particular to how I'm going to teach this course using Zoom as the mode of delivery. So the lectures will be a combination of synchronous and asynchronous. So for those of you who don't know what that is, synchronous is what I'm doing with you now. So the lectures, some lectures and the PowerPoints like this will be me talking to you and covering the material in the PowerPoint slides. And some of them will actually be asynchronous, which means I will record the lecture beforehand, and then you can access it at your leisure, basically. It's going to be before the class that it's actually due to be covered, but you can watch it as you will. I'm still admitting people here. You can watch it as you will in preparation for it. So there's going to be a combination of those. I haven't actually worked out which ratio of synchronous and asynchronous lectures are going to be, but apparently everybody who tells you how to do these kind of classes online says that that's a really good way to teach them, with a combination of those. Again, the lectures are all going to be recorded, so the ones that are synchronous will be recorded and posted on Moodle together with the lectures that are asynchronous. So they'll both be embedded on Moodle. All right, there's a chat feature on Zoom. So if you look at the bar, it should be, depends on whether you have Apple or not, it's going to be either at the top or the bottom of your screen, but there is a chat feature, and some of you have actually sent a couple of chats already. So that is where you click on that and you can write a written comment. It'll go to the class, but I'll see it as well. So if you want to ask a question and you want to do it in writing rather than simply unmuting your microphone and saying, hey, here's a question I have, then you can do that. So you have the two methods of asking or answering questions in this class. So either chat, which is an online format, or you can actually again unmute your mic and say something out loud, and you'll come to the attention of the class, because your screen, if it's just your name without the video, it's going to show up there, or it can be a video with with you. And I prefer that. Only I like to see my students, but if you want to just do it with your name, that's totally up to you. There's also a polling function on Zoom, which means that I can send out questions to the class and get your response. I'll probably use Google Forms for that purpose. So I'll send out a question, and you answer it, and it comes back to me, and it gives me ratios of who said what. If it's a yes or no question, I'll know how many people said yes, how many people said no. Or if I give you multiple choices, it'll tell me how many people chose what choices. So that's pretty cool. I haven't done this. I've used lots of Google Forms in the past, but I haven't done this as a polling within a Zoom class, because this is my very first one. So we'll see how that goes. The last time I've got here on breakout rooms. So this is pretty cool, I think, and I hope you enjoy this. So this is a part of the course that is it's class participation or class activities worth 20% of your grade. So what I'm going to do, probably most lectures, is I can automatically and randomly put you guys into groups. So there's right now there's 28 participants right now. So there's only 2 or 3 students who aren't here yet. I can randomly put you in groups of 4, 5, 6, or 7 kind of thing. And you'll go to a group, and what I'll do before each class is I will post again on Moodle. If I'm going to create 4 or 5 groups, I'll put 4 or 5 questions on Moodle, and then each of you will go to the question that I posted. I'll give you X number of minutes, 10, 15, 20 minutes, whatever. And we have to work through this together. I'm not sure how long it's going to take, but you and I can figure that out together. And then you'll come back as groups and give your response. So, the questions will be obviously something to deal with the current lecture that we're doing. So I'm going to be, so the chances are these will be in the latter part of the class after we've covered most of the material, and so then we'll break out into groups. So maybe this will be the last thing we do each class, and then I will grade you on the answers that we get. Okay. Okay, and so the last thing is that now tonight I can tell you that I was trying desperately to, and I actually rented it to get you to watch An Inconvenient Truth, which is an incredibly famous, probably the most famous documentary on the environment ever produced by Al Gore. Al Gore was a presidential candidate in the United States. He ran against George W. Bush in 2000, and he pretty much won the election, except for what was a very questionable result in the state of Florida that flipped it over to Bush, and that's still a big question. So, Al Gore, he refers to himself as the president that never was. And this is Democrats and Republicans and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, in 2006, Gore did this incredibly great documentary, but it's only available as a video on, as it turns out, Google, or I'm sorry, on YouTube videos. And so I tried again desperately to see if I could incorporate it into this lecture. And I can show you some, I can share with you some videos in this lecture, but you know, as it turns out, and I now discovered this, and I checked with all the people at the university who are in IT kind of thing, and I even asked you guys some of this. Any material that has a copyright attached to it, and the copyright obviously is something that is protected by YouTube, wherein you have to pay or rent for them. And likewise, you know, services like Netflix, which you also pay for, but you do it, you know, as you all know, on a subscription per month basis, as opposed to a per film or per TV series basis. You cannot embed those into these kind of lectures. I didn't really want to do that for you because I didn't want you to have to pay for anything. So because Inconvenient Truth was on a platform, a YouTube video that you would have to rent, I found another really great environmental documentary called A Plastic Ocean, which is on Netflix. So I'm really hoping that most of you have access to Netflix to watch this. But you know, if you don't, all right, and you have to somehow or other pay to watch it, that may happen for some of you over the course of this entire class. If that's the case and you have to spend any money whatsoever in watching things that normally I would show you in the class and wouldn't cost you anything to watch, then please keep track of it. And then when the course is over, I want you to send me a total of the funds that you've paid for these kind of things, and I'll reimburse you out of my pocket, because I really don't want you to be paying for things that in the normal course of events in an in-person class that you would have been able to see anyway. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing that for the time being. So there we go. So let me see. So there are some chats, but nothing regarding a question. Does anybody want to unmute and ask me any questions now? Somebody just do it for the sake of me knowing it works. Michelle. Peter?
There.
Oh, that's
what did you want me to do? Sorry.
I just wanted you to do exactly what you're doing. I just want to make sure that I'm getting some contact. So that's great. That's all I wanted to do. I just wanted to hear from somebody to make sure that you could unmute your mic and be part of the class. So that's great.
Excellent.
Okay.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Miles,
Oh.
I'm just wondering, for the midterm,
Yep.
Is it going to be we have like the full 3 hours to do it and submit it, or?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. That's the plan right now. Depending on where we are with respect to the content, but if it's different than that, then I'll certainly make sure there's still lots of time in the allocated 3 hours to do it. It won't. If it's 50 or 60 questions, it won't take anybody more than an hour, hour and a half tops anyway. Thanks, Kate. Any other questions?
I would like to ask, is a textbook mandatory?
Well, it's yes, it is, in that you're going to certainly want to read it to understand the lectures I give you. And you know, and I don't know, Shivani, if you missed this earlier, the midterm exam and the final exam are open book exams, which are based on, you know, content in the text. So you would really want to have that, you know, to do well on those exams.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so let's see. So Madison asked, for the day of the midterm, there's no class, just the midterm. That's likely true, but you know, get closer to that, I'll confirm that, because I did, you know, if there's content that I want to make sure we cover, you know, it may be, you know, an hour worth of a lecture and 2 hours worth of midterm. I don't know yet. I haven't set the midterm, but I'll certainly give you lots of warning. Is the midterm going to be via Google Forms? Yes, it is. So those of you who've taken it before, William, you have, yeah, so you'd be familiar with it. So it's a very, very straightforward process. It's a really cool way to do exams, because you answer the questions and then you get your grades like immediately, or almost immediately. So it's kind of cool that way. Any other questions? We good? All right, guys. So here's the deal. Go to Netflix and watch A Plastic Ocean. And then I'm going to be posting on Moodle and later after this class, two things. One of the things I do for participation is I send everybody after the class a Google form asking you to confirm if you've attended the class, the readings, watched the PowerPoint, and anything else that is particular to this class. So I send that out to everybody, and in this particular Google form today, it'll be asking you if you've watched A Plastic Ocean, the video. So you have until Thursday at 5 o'clock to watch it. So I want to make sure everybody does that before a couple hours before our next class. All right. So everybody, you know, once you've watched the documentary, send me back the Google form for participation. Everybody gets 10 out of 10 for today's participation because really there's no opportunities for a lot of questions tonight. Obviously, it's just me giving you an introduction. So everybody gets 10 out of 10. And then you get a score out of 10 for a very short film study on a plastic ocean. I'm only asking for 200 to 300 words, which is really only a page, double spaced. It'll be, and you can do it in the Google form itself and send it back to me. Okay. Let's see now. Yeah, will there be PowerPoints given on Thursday? Yeah. Thursday's going to be our first real lecture. We'll be talking about the basics of environmental law, which deals with concepts that are relevant to environmental law. We'll be talking about the evolution of environmental law in Canada, and I'll be giving you a very general lecture on Canadian law. Some of you are not law and justice students, and you need to understand how the provincial and federal systems of governance work in order to understand the various laws that we're going to be talking about during the course. So that is going to be Thursday, so there's going to be PowerPoints for that. I'll do them in a synchronous manner on Thursday, which means I'll be doing this back and forth with you guys with the PowerPoint being shared on the screen, all right, for the purposes of our first lecture. And then next week and going forward, there'll be a combination of synchronous and asynchronous lectures. All right. Okay. So again, after this class, I'll be sending you 2 forms. One will be the participation form. One will be the film study form that you can fill in. And that's pretty much anything else, guys? Are we good? All right. Listen, thank you very much. I'll post those 2 things and see you on Thursday. All right. Enjoy the documentary. Thanks, guys.
Bye.